The warm steam from the shower completely fogged up the bathroom mirror when I heard the door open behind me. For a moment, I thought I'd forgotten to lock it, but then a familiar voice drifted through the mist. "Ryan, sorry, I left my toothbrush in here." It was Alex. My heart skipped in a way I couldn't quite explain. "My name is Ryan Miller. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a home security technician in Denver, Colorado. It's the kind of job that keeps me constantly moving, installing alarm systems, checking sensors, testing cameras, yet it often leaves me feeling alone. Most of my work is solitary, long hours in quiet houses where the only sound is the low hum of electricity. I've always been a man who prefers precision and order. Maybe that's why my last relationship ended the way it did, quietly, without drama. Emily and I had been together for almost 5 years, but over time, our home began to feel more like a waiting room than a life we shared. We parted ways about 9 months ago, agreeing that love had quietly faded into routine. Since then, I've been living in a small, neatly arranged apartment on the edge of the city. Everything has its place, every morning looks the same, and every evening ends in the same silence. It's a safe life, one without surprises, but lately, that safety has started to feel like emptiness. It's as if I've been waiting for something to happen, though I couldn't tell you what. Maybe that's why, when Alex Cooper invited me to spend the weekend at his cabin near Bend, Oregon, I said yes immediately. Alex is 39, a college friend I've known for nearly 2 decades. He's always had that rare balance, confident without being loud, intelligent without being intimidating, warm without pretense. 2 years ago, Alex divorced his longtime partner and moved away from the city. He said he needed space to breathe, to think, to find quiet again. He bought a cabin deep in the forest, about 3 hours from Portland, surrounded by tall pines and the smell of earth after rain. I'd visited him a few times since my breakup. He'd always been a patient listener, the kind of person who didn't rush to fix your problems but somehow made you feel lighter just by hearing them. There was something different about our friendship, an unspoken understanding, a quiet ease that didn't require words. Alex's cabin sits at the end of a gravel road, wrapped in the kind of silence you can almost hear. The house itself is made of wood and stone, simple but welcoming, with wide windows that open toward the forest. The scent of pine drifts through the open doors, mixing with coffee and the faint smell of cedar from the fireplace. When I arrived that Friday afternoon, Alex was waiting on the porch, holding 2 bottles of beer. He was wearing a dark green flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, jeans faded from work around the cabin. His hair was a bit longer than I remembered, brushed back carelessly, and there was a calmness in his face that hadn't been there back when he lived in the city. "Long drive?" he asked, smiling. "Not bad," I said, stepping out of the car. The quiet hit me right away. No horns, no neighbors, just the sound of wind moving through the trees. We spent the rest of the afternoon on the porch, talking about work and life. He told me about a recent consulting project helping a company cut its energy use by nearly 40%. I shared stories from my job, the paranoid client who wanted cameras in every room, even the bathroom, the elderly woman who swore someone was breaking into her house just to steal cookies. We laughed, drank, and watched the sunlight fade between the trees. There were moments when our eyes met and lingered just a little too long, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was the beer, or maybe I didn't want to think too hard about it. As the evening settled in, we cooked dinner together, steaks and vegetables, a simple meal that somehow felt special. Alex had opened a bottle of wine he said he'd been saving for a quiet night with a good friend. When our hands brushed, reaching for the same knife, something inside me sparked a small electric current, gone as quickly as it came. I glanced at him, and he just smiled softly before returning to the stove. We ate by candlelight. The wooden walls glowed in the flickering orange, and the whole room seemed wrapped in warmth. Alex talked about solitude, how it had changed him, how he found peace in silence, but also how the stillness sometimes reminded him of what was missing. "There are moments," he said, "when I'd give anything just to have someone to share the quiet with." I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. I knew that feeling well, the kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from having no one who truly sees you. After dinner, we sat by the fire, the room filled with the soft crackle of burning wood. The conversation grew slower, deeper. He told me he'd always trusted me more than anyone, that our friendship meant something rare to him. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at him. There was a calm intensity in his eyes that both steadied and unnerved me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Later that night, he showed me the guest room. It was small, tidy, with a thick blanket folded neatly on the bed and a window that opened to the forest outside. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said quietly. "You'll have privacy. I usually use the one downstairs." I thanked him and closed the door, but sleep didn't come easily. I lay there for hours, listening to the wind move through the trees, my mind replaying every word, every glance from the evening. Something had changed. I couldn't yet name it, but it felt like the beginning of a truth I had been avoiding for a long time. I arrived that Friday afternoon, worn out from a long week that felt twice as heavy as usual. I had spent days installing security systems across 5 different homes, troubleshooting stubborn alarms, and dealing with impatient clients who wanted miracles overnight. The idea of a quiet weekend surrounded by nature felt like a rescue. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan was already standing on the porch, holding 2 bottles of cold beer and wearing that easy smile of his. He looked completely at peace, something I hadn't seen in him for years. He was dressed in a soft, gray flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, faded jeans, and hiking boots. His hair was a bit messy, as if he'd just come back from a trail. There was a calm about him, a groundedness that hadn't been there when he lived in the city. "How was the drive?" he asked, taking one of my bags. "Long, but worth it," I replied, glancing around at the towering pines and the stretch of silence that surrounded the cabin. It was strange how quiet could sound so alive, the wind brushing through branches, the rhythmic creak of the porch steps, and the distant hum of a stream. We spent that first afternoon sitting on the porch, catching up over beers as the late light filtered through the trees. Ethan told me about his new consulting projects, how he was helping small companies cut their energy costs and transition to sustainable systems. I shared a few stories from work about the elderly man who was convinced raccoons were stealing from his kitchen, or the client who wanted cameras installed in every corner of his mansion, even the bathrooms. Our laughter came easily, echoing in the still air between us. Between stories, there were comfortable silences where neither of us needed to fill the space. It was enough just to sit there, listening to the forest breathe. That night, we cooked dinner together, steaks, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of Cabernet Ethan had been saving for a night that feels right. He handled the grill while I chopped the vegetables, and for some reason, we worked together as if we'd done this 100 times. When our hands brushed while reaching for the same knife, something flickered a spark I pretended not to notice. He felt it too. I could tell from the way his eyes paused on mine before he looked away. Dinner was warm, slow, and unexpectedly intimate. The candlelight danced across the wood-paneled walls, flickering against the windows. Ethan spoke about life after his divorce, how he'd learned to enjoy solitude, how it helped him hear himself again, but also how the silence could get heavy sometimes. "You start realizing," he said softly, "that even the best moments don't mean much if you don't have someone to share them with." I nodded, understanding too well. I had spent countless nights finishing jobs or fixing small triumphs alone, wishing there was someone to listen. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, and outside, the world was swallowed in darkness. Even though it was summer, the air carried that mountain chill that made the fire feel perfect. We sat side by side on the couch, close enough to share the warmth, far enough to pretend it was nothing more than comfort. Conversation deepened. He told me he trusted me more than most people he'd ever known. I didn't say much in response, but something about his tone made my stomach tighten. The sincerity in his voice, the steadiness in his gaze, it stirred something unspoken inside me. We talked until midnight. Then Ethan stood and stretched. "You'll take the guest room," he said. "Bathroom's just across the hall. I usually use the downstairs one in the mornings, so you'll have your privacy." The room was simple but inviting. A double bed with a heavy wool blanket, a small lamp, and a window looking out onto the tall pines. "Thanks," I said quietly, watching him linger a moment in the doorway before he smiled and wished me good night. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pouring through the curtains and the sound of birds. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, not empty. I made my way to the kitchen, where Ethan was already up, wearing a plain white t-shirt and shorts, his back turned as he poured coffee. "Morning," he said, handing me a steaming mug. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," I replied. "Guess quiet really is medicine." We sat on the porch again, sipping coffee as the morning mist drifted through the trees. Ethan mentioned he had a few small repairs to handle around the house and asked if I could help. Of course, I agreed. First was the dripping faucet in the kitchen that had apparently been mocking him for weeks. I grabbed my tools and ducked under the sink while he held the flashlight. The space was tight, forcing us closer than necessary. When he passed me the wrench, our fingers brushed and lingered just a little too long. "Can you see the problem?" he asked, voice low and close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. My heart thudded hard in my chest. "Yeah," I murmured, tightening the loose valve. "There, it's fixed." When I sat up, he was smiling, proud and grateful. "You're amazing, Daniel," he said, his tone carrying more warmth than the words alone. Something in me shifted, but I quickly brushed it off, blaming the closeness, the quiet house, the strange intimacy of two people fixing small things together. Later that afternoon, we tackled the garage. It was a mess of boxes, tools, and half-forgotten projects. We worked in sync, sorting, lifting, and cleaning until sweat glistened on our skin and the place looked almost new. Once, when we moved a heavy shelf together, our faces ended up inches apart. For a brief second, neither of us looked away. I noticed the faint lines near his eyes when he smiled, the small scar on his jaw, and the calm steadiness that had always drawn me in. "Watch your hands," he said softly, but his voice had changed gentler, heavier somehow. When we finished, we sat back on the porch again, beers in hand, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The garage was spotless, the air smelled of pine and effort, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet sense of peace. Ethan looked at me, his expression thoughtful. "It's strange," he said, "doing something as small as this, and it feels good because you're not doing it alone." I turned toward him, meeting his eyes, and in that moment, I understood exactly what he meant. It wasn't about fixing things, it was about being seen, about sharing the silence with someone who truly noticed you. There was something deeply satisfying about spending the day fixing small things with someone who valued the process as much as the outcome. As the evening light softened around the cabin, our conversation began to drift into more personal territory. Ethan leaned back on the porch chair, his gaze lost among the trees. He admitted that his quiet life in the woods was sometimes just another name for loneliness. "There are days," he said, "when I don't talk to anyone. Just emails with clients, nothing more. It's peaceful but also empty." I nodded, understanding all too well. My own job kept me busy, but mostly isolated. I spent long hours in empty homes, calibrating systems, checking connections, never speaking to anyone beyond polite greetings. Ethan turned toward me, his voice softer now. "Sometimes I wonder if I chose this solitude because I needed it, or because I was afraid." His honesty caught me off guard. He was usually composed, decisive, the kind of person who always seemed sure of himself. "Afraid of what?" I asked quietly. He looked down at his hands. "Of being disappointed again, of expecting something real and finding out it isn't, of realizing that maybe I'm not as interesting as I seem from a distance." His words hit closer than he probably realized. That same fear had haunted me since my last relationship ended, the fear of trying again, of hoping again, only to collapse under another quiet heartbreak. "You know that's not true, right?" I said, meeting his eyes. "You're one of the most interesting people I know, and I'm not just saying that as your friend." For a moment he didn't answer. His expression softened into something I couldn't quite define, part gratitude, part something else that lingered unspoken between us. "Thanks," he said finally, his voice low. "That means more than you think." Before either of us could say more, a delivery truck rumbled up the driveway. The interruption was almost a relief, though the air between us had changed. Ethan signed for the packages, supplies for the cabin, and we helped the driver unload them. But even as we worked, that moment on the porch stayed suspended in the air, quietly shaping the space around us. I started noticing him in ways I hadn't before. The subtle strength in his arms when he lifted boxes, the way his hair fell over his forehead when he laughed, the calm confidence in his movements. It wasn't new, exactly more like I was finally paying attention. As afternoon turned to evening, the air grew cooler, the light golden. Something was undeniably shifting between us. Our eyes met more often, our pauses stretched a little longer, our words carried a weight that hadn't been there before. It was confusing and thrilling all at once. Part of me wanted to analyze it, to define it. The other part, perhaps the wiser one, wanted to simply let it unfold. That night, after a day full of work and quiet closeness, Ethan suggested we make something special for dinner as a kind of celebration. "You fixed the faucet, we cleaned the garage, we deserve a good meal," he said with a grin. We decided on grilled salmon with asparagus and lemon butter sauce. Ethan handled the fish while I prepared the vegetables. The kitchen filled with the sounds of sizzling pans, the soft hum of jazz from a small radio, and the faint scent of wine breathing on the counter. Occasionally, we brushed hands reaching for the same spice jar, passing a knife, adjusting the oven temperature. Each time, the contact lasted a heartbeat too long, leaving a subtle charge in the air neither of us acknowledged aloud. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the window, Ethan asked, "How about we open that bottle of wine from Napa, the one I told you I've been saving?" "For a special occasion?" I teased. He smiled, drying his hands. "Yeah, I think a weekend with one of my favorite people qualifies." He disappeared into the cellar and came back with a dark bottle of red. As he uncorked it, I tried to keep my voice casual. "So, I'm the special occasion?" He looked up at me, then steady, unflinching. "You've always been special, Ryan. Maybe I just never said it out loud." The words hung there, fragile and powerful at the same time. My stomach flipped, and for a moment, I couldn't find anything to say. He turned his attention back to pouring the wine, as if nothing unusual had been said, but the silence between us had deepened. We ate at the dining table with 2 candles flickering between us. The soft light played across the room, painting everything in gold and shadow. The wine was rich and full, loosening our words as the night stretched on. Ethan began to talk about his marriage in a way he never had before. He confessed that it hadn't ended in anger or betrayal, but in quiet realization. We were two good people, he said, staring into his glass, trying to force a connection that was never really there. I think we both wanted it to mean more than it did. His confession mirrored my own thoughts about my past relationship. I know what you mean, I said. Sometimes I wonder if I even remember what real chemistry feels like. Maybe I've spent so much time chasing stability that I forgot what genuine attraction is. He looked up, meeting my eyes with quiet intensity. You'd know, he said softly. When it's real, you can't mistake it. The room felt smaller then, filled with a warmth that wasn't just from the fire. The candlelight flickered between us, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I didn't know where the night would lead or what it meant, but I knew without question that something had changed forever. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Ethan lit the fireplace, filling the cabin with a soft amber glow, and put on a smooth jazz playlist that hummed quietly in the background. The couch was large enough for four, but somehow we ended up sitting closer than necessary. Our conversation flowed easily at first, but now it was punctuated by long silences and glances that lingered longer than words could hold. Ethan began speaking about how his view on relationships had changed since his divorce, how he no longer cared for appearances or social expectations. I'm done chasing what's supposed to look right, he said quietly. I just want what feels real. Then he turned toward me, his eyes calm but searching. Have you ever questioned the truths you've built your life around? He asked. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? He leaned back, still watching me. We assume we know ourselves, what we want, who we're drawn to, but what if we've never experienced something that truly moves us? What if our understanding of ourselves is just incomplete? There was a weight in his words that didn't sound hypothetical. My pulse quickened, and though I tried to sound casual, my voice came out softer than intended. Yeah, after my last breakup, I started questioning a lot of things I used to think were certain. Ethan nodded as though he already knew. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then he said something that changed everything. Ryan, you know you mean more to me than just a friend, don't you? The air thickened. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked at him, unsure if I'd heard him right. Part of me had always felt something different between us, something quiet, undefined, but hearing it said aloud was like stepping into another reality. I started, but the words tangled in my throat. He immediately backtracked. I shouldn't have said that, he said, pulling away slightly. I don't want things to get weird between us. No, I interrupted, louder than I meant to. Don't apologize. I'm just processing. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a heartbeat, everything in the room still. There was no tension, no fear, just an unspoken vulnerability in his eyes that made me want to close the space between us. Without overthinking it, I moved closer. He didn't move away. When we were close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, I whispered, I never thought about it that way. But maybe I always knew there was something different. Ethan's hand lifted slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers brushed against my jaw. His touch was gentle, deliberate, and I instinctively leaned into it. When our eyes met again, his voice came out low and unsteady. Can I? He asked. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I leaned in, and our lips met in a tentative, trembling kiss, soft at first, like a question neither of us knew how to ask. But then it deepened. Years of friendship, quiet glances, and unspoken feelings unfolded in that single moment. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't about desire. It felt like recognition, like finding something we'd both been searching for without knowing it. The taste of him carried the faint sweetness of the wine we'd shared, and the familiarity of someone I'd trusted for years. My hands moved to his shoulders, and his fingers threaded gently through my hair. Each touch was careful, reverent, filled with emotion rather than urgency. When he whispered my name against my lips, something inside me unlocked, and I realized I'd never felt this kind of closeness with anyone before. The fire crackled softly beside us, throwing warm shadows across the room. Ethan pulled a blanket from the back of the couch and wrapped it around us, creating a cocoon of quiet intimacy. His fingers traced light patterns across my arm, and for a while, neither of us spoke. The world outside seemed to disappear. There was only this small, sacred space between us. I've thought about this before, he murmured near my ear, his breath warm. But I never imagined you'd feel the same. I didn't either, I admitted. Maybe I did, but I never let myself believe it. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, kissing softly, exploring this new and fragile truth between us. There was no rush, no script, just two people discovering each other again. for the first time. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table, vibrating sharply against the wood. I ignored it at first, but it buzzed again and again. Ethan gave me a small, knowing smile. "You should probably get that," he said, though I could see he didn't want the moment to end either. I reached for it reluctantly. It was a message from Clara, the woman I'd been seeing casually for a few weeks before this trip. We weren't serious, not even close, but her name flashing on the screen hit me like a cold wave of reality. "She's asking what time I'll be back on Sunday," I said quietly. Ethan looked at me, and something shifted in his expression, not anger or sadness, but understanding. "Hey," he said softly, resting his hand on my shoulder. "It's okay. You don't have to figure everything out tonight." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. The magic of the moment had been interrupted, replaced by the weight of uncertainty. "I don't know how to handle this," I admitted. "What happened just now, it was amazing, but also confusing. I've never felt anything like it." Ethan smiled gently, the kind of smile that carries more compassion than words ever could. "You don't have to have all the answers, Ryan, not tonight." We stayed on the couch, talking softly into the early hours. The closeness remained, but it had shifted, becoming tender instead of electric, honest instead of impulsive. He told me he didn't regret a thing, but he also didn't want to pressure me. "You're one of the most important people in my life," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That won't change no matter what happens next." When we finally went to bed, it was well past 2 in the morning. In the hallway, we said goodnight with a long hug, steady, sincere, and wordless. It wasn't the hug of confusion or guilt. It was the embrace of two souls who had just crossed a line they never expected to, and both somehow knew that no matter how uncertain tomorrow might be, something true had finally been spoken between them. Lying in bed in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, replaying every moment of the night. My mind was a storm filled with feelings that didn't fit into any familiar shape. Everything I thought I knew about myself was suddenly blurred, rewritten. Yet, one truth was undeniable. Something fundamental had shifted between Ethan and me, and there was no turning back. Morning came softly, sunlight spilling through the curtains like liquid gold. I woke with that strange sense you get after a dream that feels too real to dismiss. The memory of his lips on mine, the warmth of his hands, still lingered like an echo under my skin. When I walked down to the kitchen, Ethan was already there, pouring coffee. The air felt charged, quiet but full of meaning. He smiled when he saw me, but there was a carefulness in his eyes as if he was trying to read what version of me had woken up today. "Sleep well?" he asked, offering a cup. "Eventually," I said with a small laugh. "And you?" "Pretty much the same." We sat at the table in silence for a while, sipping coffee. It wasn't awkward, but everything unsaid hung heavy in the air between us. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Ryan, about last night." "I know," I interrupted softly. "I've been thinking about it all night, too." I took a deep breath. "I don't regret it. It was honest, but I do need time to understand what it means." I nodded. He nodded, his expression calm, almost relieved. "That's fair. I just want you to know there's no pressure. Whatever happens, our friendship matters more than anything." His maturity disarmed me. How could someone be so grounded about something so life-altering? His grace only made me more certain that this wasn't a mistake, it was something real. We spent the morning tidying up the cabin, folding blankets, washing dishes, and getting ready for my drive back. There was a quiet melancholy in the air, not just because of the goodbye, but because both of us knew that what had happened couldn't simply fade into the background. It had rewritten something essential in the way we saw each other. As I packed my bag, Ethan helped me fold my clothes. When our hands brushed over the same shirt, the contact lasted only a moment, but it carried the entire weight of the night before. "Ethan," I said quietly, "thank you for being so patient with me. My head's a mess right now." He smiled faintly. "It's not confusion, Ryan. It's discovery, and discovery always takes time." His words struck something deep in me. He wasn't just patient. He was wise in a way that made me feel safe enough to explore this new part of myself without fear. When it was finally time to leave, we stood together on the porch, watching the sunlight ripple through the trees. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. We were both memorizing the stillness, knowing life would feel different once I drove away. "Will we stay in touch?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Always," he said simply. "No matter what happens, you're one of the most important people in my life." The hug that followed was long, steady, full of unspoken things. When we finally let go, I saw the same mix of hope and uncertainty in his eyes that I felt in my own chest. The drive back to Seattle was quiet and introspective. The world outside looked the same, but something inside me had changed completely. I felt as though I was leaving behind not just a weekend, but an older version of myself, one that had lived in denial of feelings too deep to name. It was liberating, and it was terrifying. Over the next few weeks, Ethan respected my space. He didn't push, didn't ask for answers. We texted, called, and our conversations carried the same warmth as before, but there was something more beneath the surface, a quiet current neither of us tried to label. I still saw Clara, the woman I had been casually dating, but each time we met, I felt the hollowness of pretending. The easy laughter, the polite small talk, all of it felt like a performance next to the raw connection I'd found with Ethan. It wasn't fair to her, and eventually, I had to admit that truth to myself. About 3 weeks later, during one of our late-night phone calls, Ethan asked, "How are you holding up?" "Still processing," I said honestly. "But I can't pretend it didn't mean something. I don't know what happens next, but I know I need to be honest about what I'm feeling. About you." There was silence on the line, then his calm voice. "There's no rush, Ryan. I'll be here when you're ready to figure it out. Frem." That night, after hanging up, I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker below. Everything looked familiar, yet I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. The weekend with Ethan hadn't just changed the way I saw him, it had changed the way I saw myself. He had opened a door to a part of me I didn't know existed, and I knew there was no going back. In the end, what I found wasn't just love or confusion, it was awakening, a discovery of depth, connection, and truth that had always been waiting beneath the surface. And though I didn't yet know where it would lead, I knew one thing for certain. Some encounters don't just change your story, they change who you are. Ryan's story isn't just about love, it's about awakening. If you were in his place, would you tell Ethan how you truly feel, or walk away in silence? Leave a comment below. Your words might be exactly what Ryan needs to hear. And if his journey touched something in you, give this video a like so we can keep telling stories that remind us what it means to be human.